Hello everyone and welcome. This is Abigail Barella with Sparkle and Shine Guidance, and it is time to talk about eclipse season. It's time to talk about these eclipses. So if you're just joining, if you don't already have your chart pulled up, definitely pull up your charts. Let me know in the comments where this eclipse is happening for you. If you're just joining, we're talking about this really fascinating eclipse season that we're about to go into. We are in this time of transition. If you're not feeling this already, this is what's happening. This is a transitionary year. There's a lot of different things transiting. I've been talking about this. You probably heard me talk about this, is when there's a lot of things that, the end degrees of something, the beginning degrees of something, we're in this transitory phase. So I'm going to start with talking about what this eclipse is, what eclipses are in general, what the nodes of the what the nodes of the moon are, and why it's so important to know what your nodes are. And then I will talk about what we've been through with the 2022 eclipses, where we're going with these 2023, 2024 eclipses, where this eclipse will be visible, what a hybrid eclipse is. So I'm going to talk about all those things. So we are going to be talking all about eclipses, because I feel like a lot of times we talk about eclipses, we talk about the nodes, and I don't really take the time to go into what exactly eclipses are astrologically, and what the nodes of the moon are, and how they're significant to you in your life and the collective, and how to find your nodes and what that actually means. So let's start with what eclipses are, because it's really easy to kind of skip over this. Eclipses are huge flushes of energy. I often talk about, if you've heard me talk about this before, sorry. I often talk about like how a lunar cycle on its own is like a flush of energy, right? But sometimes the shit is so big that it can't just get flushed out with a normal toilet flush. It needs a super powerful eclipse to flush it down. So it is like a massive extra plunger flush on the toilet, okay? And so that being said, it's a little chaotic. It's a little out of our control. And it's so important to understand how to work with this energy instead of trying to resist it. And so some of us, I was born during an eclipse, and if you're born during an eclipse, these eclipse cycles tend to be extra powerful. I gave birth to my first child during an eclipse. My mother died during an eclipse. Like, big significant things happen for me during these eclipses, and that happens for everybody, but this is specifically true if you were born in an eclipse. How do you know if you were born in an eclipse? You would look at your chart and see where the nodes of the moon are. If the nodes of the moon are in the same sign, either the north or the south node is in the same sign as your sun and very close to your sun, you were born during an eclipse. Now, you can be born during two types of eclipses, a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. And then you can be born with a south node eclipse or a north node eclipse, okay? So the north node, which is what we're having now, we're moving into the solar eclipse and pointing us towards the north node. And that north node tends to be our future, our dharma, what we're moving into. A south node eclipse is our past, what we're flushing out, what we're clearing out, what maybe we need to remember to carry forward from the past. And so it's a really important thing to understand your nodes, because we are all born during an 18-month period where the nodes were in a certain sign. And that's going to represent to you your personal dharma and your personal karma. And it's really important to kind of go into this deeper in a chart. And so this is something that we really focus on. If you've been interested in learning more about your chart and how to use it for your business and your work in the world, I have an amazing upcoming journey, Magnum Opus, and it is all about your greatest work here in this world. And we are going to have an element of bringing in your astrology. I'm making this amazing workbook that dives into this journaling prompts and different ways to process and work with what you already have going on within you. We often think that we have to change a lot of things in order to be successful, or that we have to work on, we need to get better at these things, or we need to learn how to get more discipline in these areas. And oftentimes it is the case that we need to release those voices and just amplify our natural energies. And this is what, for me, astrology does. It really helps you to clear the conditioning that says that you need to be a certain way in order to get what you want. And instead we amplify who you already motherfucking are, and letting that get bigger so that people can feel you and see you and tap into that energy so that they can have permission to shine in their natural energies as well. So if you're interested in that, that is going to be going through eclipse season, from this Aries solar eclipse to the lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And so that will go from, I think it's April 20th to May 11th. Okay. So if you're interested in that, reach out. I have stuff in my story all about that. So the nodes of the moon are points on the ecliptic that represent and are a holding place for where the eclipses happen. Okay. And because of that, and because eclipses are naturally huge flushes of energy that have significance and have to do with our dharma and our karma, then it is important to understand where those are in your chart. And those nodes hold a certain frequency, and they are connected to your deepest inner moon lunar energies, and that connection to the higher frequencies of light and consciousness. So when we look at that, we're really talking about the subconscious, the feminine, and the conscious, the masculine within you. And so the sun and the moon. And so it's really important to understand this concept when we're looking at eclipses. This is from the perspective of astrology. Okay. So the 2022 eclipses were all about the feminine. We are amplifying the feminine. You're probably seeing more people shine in their feminine. More people have permission to be in their feminine. People working on their emotional health, their well-being, their intuition, sharing more things from that place, and also just a lot of deeper inner work. And that's very yin, very feminine. And now we are moving into a cycle of the masculine. We're not quite there yet, because as you can see with this eclipse cycle, it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid eclipse. And let me explain what that means from an astrological perspective. From an astrological perspective, that means that we have the sun in Aries, but that north node is still in Taurus. Now, to get really confusing, the nodes move back through the chart, which also means they move back through the seasons. So you'll notice that a couple years ago, we were having eclipses in the summer, and now we've moved into the spring. And then we will move back into the winter. So they take us back in the cycle of things. And that's kind of the energy of the nodes in general. Sometimes we have to move back in order to move forward, right? So this is the energy of the nodes. And because the 2022 eclipses were in Taurus, Scorpio, and because the nodes are changing signs this summer into Aries, North Node, and Libra, South Node, we are in a transitionary phase, and we are in a hybrid time. So we have this solar eclipse in Aries, but the North Node is still directing us through a Taurian lens, through a Venusian lens, through a what do you love and what do you honor and what do you value and what are your morals and what do you believe in and where do you feel the most secure. And so we have that essence to this hybrid eclipse. And we also then will have the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, which is feminine. Now it has some masculine energy to it, just like a lot of them do, right? They're kind of like a hybrid of both the masculine and feminine. And Scorpio is definitely like that, right? It takes us deep feminine, but it requires us to be the alchemist. It requires us to hold that sacred space for ourselves. And it requires us to have this fierceness, this tenacity. This scorpionic energy is very like the scorpion, and also represented by the eagle. So it's very much like a masculine feminine sign, okay? And so we are moving into a time period where we're leaving behind the Taurus Scorpio nodes, the Taurus Scorpio eclipses, and we are moving into a time of the Aries Libra eclipses. And it takes some time for this to like digest and move totally forward into it. It's not until 2024 that we will have both the for the spring, so next April, we'll have both the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse both in Aries Libra. Until then, we're still transitioning. Until then, we're still understanding and working with these themes of the feminine integrated into our masculine divine action, integrated into our ability to take what we've learned and like bring it to the world. So this is a really important time that if energetically looking at this, the way I'm seeing this is like our tools are still being sharpened. We're still being sharpened. We're still being worked over. And that is a really important process that we can't skip over. And I want to talk about, since I'm mentioning skip steps, this is a year where we have Pluto squaring the North and South node, okay? And when we see that, it's telling us, don't skip steps. And any skip steps that you've had along the way thus far, you're going to have to meet and greet and integrate in order to move forward. So not only are we energetically, am I seeing that as like a time of us being sharpened and our skills being sharpened and our tools being sharpened and our wit being sharpened and our emotions getting like, not necessarily a sharpening, but this capability to meet ourselves and meet our emotions without having our emotions kind of rule our whole world, right? Which is what we've been through. So when we had the North Node in Taurus, and we also had that, we still have Uranus in Taurus, there was a lot of like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with what you're sharing, or I don't feel what you're sharing is right, or it's not in line with my morals or my values, and so you're wrong, and my emotions say to cancel you, that kind of thing. We're moving away from that. Like we learned like, maybe I'm getting triggered, and maybe I need to pause and reflect and do some integration work. And then I can kind of maybe see where this person could be coming from without necessarily agreeing. Okay. So we all have these deep latent powers within us, and they're very scorpionic. It's very feminine. It's very deep within us. And at this time, when we start to move into this Aries North Node and we start to move into this Aries energy, those latent powers start to bubble up and they start to rise up. And it's one of these things where it's an opportunity and there has to be a choice made, whether you're going to fully trust yourself or you're going to fully trust the work that you've put in the last few years, or if you're just kind of not trust yourself and move backwards. So it's really important to understand that all that you've been through and all that maybe you still feel like you're in is sharpening you for what's to come, is preparing you for what's to come. So that's the energetic of this time period of the hybrid eclipses. What we know about the hybrid eclipse in astronomy is that it starts as an annular and actually ends up as a total. So because it's both, it has that hybrid element. And what is hybrid? It's like two things coming together, and that's kind of where we're at, right? We're like moving out of one cycle, moving into another, and we need this like integration, like, oh, maybe it's just an annual. Oh no, it's a total, and we'll probably feel that. Like we probably feel like, oh, maybe this eclipse isn't that big a deal. And then like all of a sudden, like, oh no, it is a really big deal. I really feel this one. So a total solar eclipse is a new moon eclipse. And so this is a new moon eclipse, and it's happening on April 19th for some of us and April 20th for those on the East Coast and different places, okay? This is going to be visible in Australia and in Indonesia. And it's really important to understand that the place in Australia where it's visible is this very sacred, all land is sacred, but it's a very sacred place that the Aboriginal people, it's Ningaloo. I'm probably saying that wrong, so I apologize, but it's this peninsula and it's extremely visible there. And what we say in astrology is wherever the eclipse is visible is most likely where it's going to cause change and effect in the next year or so. So because the next few eclipses really highlight Australia, it's an interesting thing because Australia has gone through a lot as a country, so it's curious to see where it will continue to go. So following that might be something to keep in mind. So this is the eclipse that we're talking about is on April 19th or 20th. It's at 29 degrees of Aries. So looking at your own chart and seeing where 29 degrees of Aries is in your chart is going to show you where this eclipse is creating a massive flush of energy, a massive rebirth opportunity. And so it's a really great time to understand that more. If you want to get a full reading with me, it's a good time to dive into that, so you can reach out if you're interested in that. So let's talk about the astrology of this eclipse. Since I went into like what eclipses are, I didn't necessarily talk about the other transits that are happening with this eclipse. So the most important is that Jupiter, we just had, so today is April, what is today? April 12th. April 11th, we had Jupiter conjunct the sun. So we had that cazimi of Jupiter and the sun. It's a very expansive day. It's a day where like people are like, oh, things like feel good, right? And so it's a beautiful thing to have the sun meeting Jupiter before we move into this eclipse, because it brings in that possibility energy. And more than anything in our world right now, we need to feel hope. We need to feel possibility. And so we have Jupiter. Jupiter is really close to this hybrid total solar eclipse. And because of that, so it has this Jupiterian expansion energy. So again, looking through those last like really, 10 degrees, last 5 degrees of Aries and the first 5 of Taurus, because we still have the North Node in Taurus, is going to show you where you're being asked to have a rebirth and you're being asked to get bigger, think bigger, expand bigger, and trust yourself that you can grow into this next phase. We also have Vesta right there, and Vesta is the Passionista. She's all about burning your own fire bright and tending to your own flames. So wherever you have noticed in your life where you tend to go over and tend to other people's flames, or tend to go spend some energy or spend some time here so that you can feel loved and cherished and nurtured, and so that you can feel like you're valuable, this is a time where you pull that energy back and you start to recognize how much you're giving to other people's flames, how much you're giving to other people's lives. And it's not that you necessarily need to see a return on investment. It's not that you necessarily need to have a tit for tat, or, giving and taking doesn't have to be so, there's a word for it, but kind of like this consumerism idea of, I gave you that, now you give me this. I take that and you take this. So we really are coming out of that. But what's really important in this time is, where have you stopped tending to your own flames? Where are you being called into tending those flames even bigger? And this is what Bitches Shine Brighter is all about. It's my energetic boundary setting course. It's available through the link in my profile. And really, this is a time, because we have Saturn in Pisces, we have Mars in Cancer. There can be a little bit of like seeing your own passive aggressiveness, seeing where you're not speaking up for yourself, seeing where you kind of just like, oh, whatever you need makes me happy. Transactional, thank you. Where things have gotten transactional, but we need things to not be transactional, and we need everyone to be taking care of themselves to a level that we can trust them, right? If someone's just overgiving, there is this element of distrust that comes with that, where you can't really trust their word anymore, because you've had experiences where with this person or with these people where they did overgive and then they lashed out at you, or they, said something about it, or you can just read energy and you know they're giving from this place of an empty well or like martyrdom. And so this is a really big time to come out of martyrdom and recognize in your own life where maybe you operate from this place. Okay, so this first eclipse on April 19th, 20th, depending on where you are, West Coast 19th, East Coast 20th, but it doesn't really matter because it reverberates for like a week. Really, with anything that happens to you within the week of, so we're in it really today. That's why I'm making this video. anything that happens today is really like a part of this eclipse energy, okay? So it's really a big energy, and it's setting the tone for the next 6 months. So if we look at the last eclipse that was in November, it was actually November 8th. It was a huge time for people. It was right around the time we also had Mars retrograde. We also had Mercury retrograde during that time, and we're about to have Mercury go retrograde right at the time of this eclipse as well. So prepare yourselves for that. I'll have more to come on that. But because of that, and because now finally Mars is in Cancer, it's not a great place for Mars to be. So we've been dealing with a lot of Mars themes, which is interesting, right? Because the traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars, and the traditional ruler of Aries is Mars. And we're having an eclipse in both the Mars signs, okay? And so we're having this eclipse in both the Mars signs, but if you look at where the North Node is directing us, it is to our feminine, it is Taurus. So it is really about taking this energy and recognizing where in your life. Hi, if you're just joining. Hi, Taylor. Hi, Kendra. I'm just seeing comments pop up now. So let me know in the comments if you know where 29 degrees of Aries is in your chart, and where, even without knowing that, maybe where you're feeling this rebirth energy, where you're feeling this like you're being sharpened for something, you're being prepared for something, you're being worked over for something, okay? So as I was saying, that it's this Mars drive energy, and the higher aspect of Mars is divine action, where you're being called into action. And this is just the beginning of that. So if you're not feeling that completely yet, if you're still feeling like there's inner work to do, that you're still feeling like there's integration to do, you are in divine timing, right? Trusting that. And at the same time, knowing and asking and listening to where you're being directed to move soon. Because we're all being asked to move, metaphorically, physically, maybe, in a certain way right now, okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's time to do it. It just means that you're being prepared for that. Now, because Mars is also at the lower end, aggression and violence and war, we also have to be aware that because Pluto is so active in the sky, and because Mars is so active in the sky, we have to be careful of not falling into the illusion of having an enemy or being at war with somebody. And I definitely feel in our world sphere, we're going to be influenced to feel that way. So certain things might happen in our world that stir up hate and stir up fear and stir up angst. And it's so important to meet those parts of ourselves without needing to be right or be better than, or to go to war with something. Now, this is really important because the last time we saw transits like this was when we had the Vietnam War. And I think that everybody and their mother, if you know anything about the Vietnam War, knows that that was a huge mistake and affected so many families all over the world, but especially within the United States and, of course, Vietnam. And this disruption to our process, and this disruption to where we're all trying to go as a society. So it's very important to stay vigilant within yourself. If you're being shown an enemy, if you're being shown someone to hate on or to blame, it's a trap. And we know it's a trap, and yet we see so many people falling for it. I mean, the biggest example is how much emphasis we still see in our society being placed on Donald Trump. And I don't like to bring him in, but it's just like such a fascinating thing to see that we all need an enemy so bad that we will go into the past to bring it forward into now. And instead, we could be going in these new directions. We could be going different places, but it's very clear that we don't have the leadership to do that there is no way to do that if we don't have the leadership for that. And so we have to create that within ourselves. And how do we create that within ourselves? We recognize and acknowledge all of our triggers, the shame, the guilt, the fear, the places where we didn't feel good enough, the places where we didn't feel accepted. It's from that place that we will be tripped up into believing that there is a good guy and a bad guy, okay? And so this is a very much an important thing as we move into these eclipses, to have that awareness, and then to also have that awareness within your personal life. Who are you creating the enemy? Who are you creating as the bad guy in your life? Who's the villain? And really recognizing and honoring that the inner work is calling to you if that's the case. If you feel that way strongly in your life, it's a good time to do the inner work, and I'm here for it. I love holding that space for y'all. So reach out if you're interested in that. I will say I'm super excited about the group journey that I have starting at the eclipse and going through May 11th. And it's all about getting to your greatest work. Where some of my other journey works are about more of the feminine, this is about honoring the masculine within yourself as a woman. So it's specifically for women, but honoring your greatest work and what you have to confront and what the inner work that you have to do in order to bring your message, your brand, your visibility to the world. And so I'm super excited about that. And so if you're interested in that, definitely check it out, reach out if you're interested. And lastly, I'll say about this eclipse that I didn't mention was that Pluto has just moved into Aquarius. It's only going to be there for a little while, and then it's going to move back into the Anaretic degree of Capricorn. So we have this Anaretic degree total solar eclipse, which is like, can we get to the mastery of Aries? Like, can we kind of become the spiritual warrior? Can we become who we want to be and what we want to see reflected out in the world? Can we be that? But then we also have Pluto squaring. It's a wide orb square, but still, in my opinion, squaring this total solar eclipse. And so looking at where that 0 degree, that first degree of Aquarius is in your chart, and seeing where you're being confronted with your own inner villain, and where you're being asked to look at your shadow, and where you're being asked to integrate more shadow, and so that you can become the gift, so that you can become the leader, and so that you can really hone these skills. This is a time where you're being sharpened. And so just allow yourself to be sharpened. If you know that, and if you accept that, how much more would you be able to share with the world, instead of feeling like the world's out to get you, certain people are out to get you, or the world's working against you? What if you just knew? What if you just knew deep in your bones that this was it? This was what was happening for your highest good and for the highest good of all. So blessed be. Reach out if you're interested in that group journey, and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.